concert I went to before Alan was Three Dog Night. And who's the lead singer of Three Dog Night?
Chuck.
Negron.
Cousins! But they say it different. It's confusing. I don't know. Cousins, and they say it different, but I think that's so cute. And we also have 2 Degrees of Taylor. I was telling him last night on the phone. When I was in college, I directed this film called this play called The Wager, and in it was David Brown, who was in Fast Times at Ridgemont High with Taylor. Okay, yeah, that's okay. Now I told you everything. All right. He is an accomplished comedian, actor, author. Taylor Negron is currently appearing in Los Angeles in the multi-extended, sold-out theater piece, Streep Tease, an evening of Meryl Streep monologues performed by 8 men. The LA Times wrote, "Things take a surprisingly serious turn with Taylor Negron's monologue from Sophie's choice, a quietly delicate performance that does fitting service to Streep's mastery." For the last few years, he has toured with his show, The Unbearable Lightness of Being Taylor Negron, fusion of story and song, which was included in the 2009 Best of New York Solo Festival. His comedy essays are currently published in the anthology Dirty Laundry and Love West Hollywood, Reflections of Los Angeles. Taylor has starred in his own HBO special and has appeared on The Tonight Show. His films include Easy Money, Punchline, Stuart Little, The Last Boy Scout, Angels in the Outfield, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and the much ballyhooed hit, our own Paul Provenza's The Aristocrats. Crats. Recent TV appearances include Curb Your Enthusiasm. Jeff was here. We had Jeff, yeah. Reno 911 and The Wizards of Waverly Place. My kids will love that. As a playwright, Taylor wrote the LA Times Critics' Choice Gangster Planet, and he's got a new one in development that I didn't forget the name, but you'll laugh if I pronounce it. Go ahead, Taylor. What's it called?
Well, it's actually called Yoga Bitch.
No, that I could have said. It says Le Canard Gris or something. Yeah, yeah.
Le Canard Gris sounds better than Yoga Bitch.
I like Yoga Bitch better. He directed 3 Feet Under, which was produced by Lily Tomlin and Jane Wagner. And he's currently directing Who Loves You, Baby, a musical tribute to Telly Savalas. A contributing writer to the Huffington Post, he keeps no pets, not even me. Ladies, please welcome Taylor Negron.
Like we should all sleep here for 3 days. And also the big shout out is to your mother. That's the best strudel I've ever had in my life.
Oh,
It was just this is part of this was published in a book that I forgot. I think it was Memories of West Hollywood in that book, that anthology. I have been touring the country doing The Unbearable Lightness of Being Taylor Negron, and I had a musician called Logan Heftel who works with me, and I wish he was here because he plays along with this. And this piece in particular is my favorite because it's the first long-term piece I wrote, and I wrote it and my computer crashed in the middle of it, and I was so mad that I drove to the Apple store and I paid a lot of money to have it all replaced, and I went right back to where I was sitting and finished it. So this is good. So I'm glad that you asked me to read this. And here we go. This is called Tuesdays with Lucy, and it's pretty self-explanatory. Lucille Ball was my acting teacher for 8 weeks in the fall of 1977. She taught me, you better know your lines. Be prepared and show up early. She taught me how to play drunk. Say every word slowly and clearly. Drunks don't want you to know they're drunk. And know your props. Everything you saw me do on I Love Lucy was practiced and rehearsed for days. Her tone was serious. And when I'm channel surfing and I see America's favorite redhead, she connects me to a world that's more black than white, because I was a witness to her wounds. It was the year of Saturday Night Fever, before AIDS, before cell phones. There were only 13 channels. I was 19 years old. It was a slimmer, a more bell-bottomed me. I was lean, I was mean, and I had a shag. I also had a job at the Sherwood Oaks Experimental Film School on the corner of Hollywood Boulevard and Ivar over a Tom McCann shoe store that sold only platform shoes that day. One of my daily tasks was to read the celebrity service and let my boss, Gary, know what big star or director was in town so we could gently stalk them. So they would come down to lecture in that school's makeshift campus with its yellow linoleum floors. Now, it's hard to imagine that people, no less celebrities, would show up and share of themselves for free anywhere, but this was the 70s, a rare time when Hollywood's excesses were eclipsed by hippie decor, and those successful people came to our school seeking to impress us with their lack of display, with their absence of possession. One stiflingly hot afternoon, Dana, a girl who also worked at the school, ran into our cluttered office out of breath. "Lucille Ball just walked into the optometrist's office on Ivar." What? Gary stood up with a feline intensity and disappeared out the door. Dana followed. Gary reappeared minutes later looking like a black cat that had swallowed an orange canary. Lucy's going to teach a course here, he said flatly. "Lucy Ricardo? You're going to teach a class here?" I asked Dana if she was nice, and Dana said, I don't know if nice is the way to put it. She seems very tense. A few months later, Lucy's sold-out class began, and Gary was very straightforward with me as he handed me a list of items to be placed in her dressing room. A pack of Pall Mall non-filtered cigarettes, a bag of chocolate Pokin cookies, and a bottle of scotch. And then Gary went like this. Now you know your life is going to change when someone goes, Gary asked me to wait in the alley behind the school and welcome and escort Lucille Ball up the stairs, and I was thrilled to be given such a task. At precisely 6:45, a green country squire station wagon with wooden doors appeared and parked, and from where I stood, I could see Lucille Ball. She was sitting in the passenger seat. Her hair was pink. Pink like the inside of a flamingo's hairbrush. I've never seen hair that color again. And it distracted me from the very bizarre moment, the bizarre fact that Lucille Ball was crying. Huge tears, wiping them from her eyes and attempting to apply a pink-orange lipstick that she wore for countless magazine covers and close-ups. She got out of the car wearing an orange polyester pantsuit that flared at the foot, and she was taller than I expected. But I wasn't prepared for this Lucy with no makeup, no false eyelashes on her swollen blue eyes, this human, sad Lucy standing before me in the hazing, phasing Hollywood light. Lucy darted in front of me up the stairs through the throngs as though she knew where she was going, and the audience stood on its feet. And they cheered for Lucy and for themselves. And in that room, like bees deliriously sucking up pollen from some abnormally bright giant sunflower, they celebrated Lucy's offerings of undistracted happiness. And Lucy seemed slightly disturbed by this adoration. Her face looked like a snake that had come up and out of a coil, an ancient creature suddenly awoken by some oncoming stampede. I was in the back of the room, and I had a feeling that something was going to be revealed to me like a circus ride where the floor disappears from the very bottom of your feet. Because she began to cry again. And a hush came over the room, and some people thought it was a gag and laughed nervously, but I knew it wasn't. And then Lucy spoke. The kindest and the most lovely woman in the world died an hour ago. Leila Rogers, Ginger's mother. I didn't know that movie stars had mothers. I thought that movie stars came out of clams. In the early 30s, Lucy said, girls came to Hollywood, and when they got off the train, they were met by men impersonating agents and studio executives, and they offered the girls rides home, and then the men raped the women. The word unleashed more fat, wet tears. And Leila Rogers created the Hollywood Studio Club, a place where young actresses could go and be safe from these men, because in those days, when a girl was raped, she never mentioned it. Lucy freaked. She was melting. Lucille Ball was bawling. And that's when I realized that Lucy was one of those girls. This was not going to be a class about Vita, meat, and vegetable. Composing herself, she looked out at the crowd like an old pink gorilla, pointing her fingers at students who dared put up their hand. Girl in the black sweater. Boy in the paisley shirt. Most of you aren't going to make it in show business. Most of you aren't that good. And there isn't enough room for all of you. You have to be honest with your chances. I didn't do the pilot for I Love Lucy until I was 40 years old. Desi and I knew it was our last chance. She was still pissed. And she lit another Pall Mall that hung from her mouth like that of a prison matron. And she inhaled deeply and exhaled pure gray smoke. We got a sponsor, but the network balked at the idea of me having a spick husband, and she hit the word spick. And they refused to put up the money for the insurance policy we needed in order for that pilot to be filmed. And to pay for that policy, Desi and I had to take out a second mortgage on the house in Chatsworth. That house was all we had. If the show failed, we would have lost everything. And I would have had to move back to Jamestown. For days, Lucy and Desi stewed over the decision to put the house up for collateral. And then Lucy told me something. No one really has ever said this, but it's true. She said she'd fall asleep, and Carol Lombard walked into her room. I knew it was a dream. Carol had been dead for 6 years. She died in a plane crash selling pods in Vegas. I looked up to Carol Lombard a great deal. She walked in the room. She sat on my bed. She looked wonderful. Lucy was taught by the studio linguists to speak in a clean, R-less, mid-Atlantic accent. She did not say wonderful. She said wonderful, which gives me hope. And you'll hear it if you ever watch Lucy. It will give us hope for all the things that exist in life that are wonderful. Carol looked at me and said, mortgage the house, Lucy. This is what you want. Sign the papers and you'll be free. And then Carol walked out of the room. Lucy signed the deal, and in return, CBS gave the two of them ownership of the actual film. And they became richer than either of them could have ever imagined. All because of the words of a ghost. One of the students asked Lucy, what was it like being the most famous woman of the 1950s? And Lucy took a very long time to reply, and she said, I didn't know until the 1960s. I was too busy driving over Laurel Canyon twice a day to know. There's a large old craftsman house on the corner of Laurel Canyon and Lookout Mountain Road. And whenever I drive through that haunted canyon, I get the opportunity sometimes to stop at the red light there. And I think, Lucy stopped here. Sometimes stoplights provide necessary punctuation. A period, a moment to stop and connect the past to your present. She was in the middle of it, connecting the dots to the days. I'm moved by this right now. She's had. connecting the dots to the days, creating hilarity out of darkness. Lucy Ricardo hit a note. Lucille Ball hit a chord. And that's why we like Lucy. For hers is the music of someone who has been radically humanized. In that yellow room on Hollywood Boulevard, Lucille Ball taught me to pay attention to the plain space that I inhabit, because if we don't, accidents of destiny and catastrophes of success can occur. But ultimately, we are all responsible for what we become. She also told me that her favorite episode of I Love Lucy was when they went to Hollywood and met William Holden. And she told us that filming that episode, something unexpected and very dangerous occurred. She was disguising herself with a putty nose, and when Ricky lit her cigarette, the nose burst into flame. And you can watch it on the episode, and you'll see the actors react with absolute stunned horror. And I am still transported to the state of gleeful anticipation when she rearranges the putty on her face and she says, "This California sun sure makes your skin soft." I imagine that when she was doing this, immersing herself in her work, that she forgot her pain. And when we watch her, we're distracted from our own. And this is wonderful.
Taylor. And one of my most prized possessions is my receipt, which I still have. That class was $40.
Oh my God. Oh my God. All right, okay. Wow. We're going to say hello to each other, and then we're going to come back really fast so we can have discussion, okay? And everybody's writing today was hindsight. It was the only thread I could think of that that seemed to be in everybody's work. So, Paul used to be a lawyer, had this transition, became a writer. Taylor was looking back on his experience with Lucy. Claire, this mom who makes this thing, and what we do, and then we realize what we've done afterwards.
You used to be really horny.
Well, that's not applicable. Used to be would not be appropriate. Anyway, so I was thinking, I don't really know where that's going to go, if it's going to go anywhere, but it was sort of the only thing that sort of tied everything together for me. If you've thought of something else, that's great. Wow, we're really close.
I really like you.
So anything you want to talk about, anything you want to ask, go. Who wants to say something? No, don't do this. Marla.
Taylor, how long did it take you to write that piece? Was that, I mean, how many drafts would you guesstimate that was? Because it just seemed like it was stream of consciousness.
It was 3 drafts, and then I was lucky enough to work with the director, David Schweitzer, who directed the play, to dramaturge it.
Got it.
And to be an editor.
Yeah.
It's so important to have that. So a couple of times he would say, you said that already.
Got it.
And we got that. So one of the things about what I do is because it's aimed for performance, it's so important that it's edited and that you never say the same thing twice. And so it was, most of my work is with very good editors. But I do write stream of consciousness.
Yeah, it sounded like you sat down, wrote it, and read it. I mean, really, it was just brilliantly done. I so enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Agreed. Who else has something to say? Come on, we're fighting for discussion. Let's talk.
I'll just chime in because oftentimes when people write their memories, there's, an exaggeration and a twist and it turns and there's a theatrical of this and that and the other because you feel it's not enough. And I have the unique experience of getting to be the witness.
I know she was in the class.
I know, that's crazy.
And it was and what I really appreciate about your writing as how conservative your writing is, that there's a poise with the letting the truth be enough. That so what I feel happened is that you allowed Lucy to come out through the writing as opposed to you putting your projections on it.
Yeah,
And
which
that's
would've been
really
bad. You don't do that to
valuable,
Lucille
that's
Ball.
very talented.
You know.
Yeah, that was really, I felt like that
That's
was
right,
really
good writing, that's good writing.
That's just good writing.
Harriet,
That's right.
I want to ask Paul a question about his previous women characters. You said you really didn't get it until this one, which I clearly believe that you did. And it is hard. I mean, Tennessee Williams, for obvious reasons, was good at it. But I wonder why you had trouble in the past, and what characteristics of your women characters do you feel you failed because of?
Well, I created stock characters. I was really good at doing a femme fatale who at some point would do a twist and turn and kill some other character or trap a man in a bad situation, that sort of thing. I don't know why that came so easy.
Why that came so easy.
But of course, again, and as I call that's a stock character. So, you know, if in every book Jake Lassner gets fooled by a beautiful, deceptive woman, you know, that gets a little boring fast.
Were you ever in those women's heads and saw what they were thinking, or?
I thought you said we were in those women's beds. So it took me a second time to hear what you said. I'm not sure. I just know there was something lacking there, and I had to live a little bit more. I think I had to get married a couple more times. I need more women. I had to be intelligent, articulate women, and then to create what I think of as equal characters, or really a woman who's smarter than the male lead character, and that becomes more fun too.
Andy?
What other male authors do you believe write women well?
I just mentioned I thought Stephen King really
Yeah.
writes women well, and I just admire so much of his characters. Some of the horror and shock genres is not for me, but he really is good with character.
Robert
And-
Parker is too.
I beg your pardon?
Robert Parker.
It's funny you mentioned Robert Parker. I was just asked this week to edit an anthology.
Really?
Where I have to get a bunch of other writers, like Lee Child, Michael Connelly, those people, to write about Parker and Spencer. I
That's
think
so
I'm
good.
going to do it.
Cool.
And of course, Parker, for those of you who've read Spencer and some of the other ones, with, is it Susan Silverman?
Susan.
The right name? The girlfriend,
Psychologist, yeah.
psychologist, is an equal partner and really smart. And he does the same in some of his other things. I'm
Very
a big
nice.
admirer
Yeah.
of Parker.
Go ahead, Candy.
Sue Grafton.
Which is good.
Yeah, but I was thinking of men.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It comes
Do you
easy.
think that when you read women writers, do you think that they have the same trouble with men, or do you think
What
that?
makes you think I would read women right
About women writing.
No, I think women are better at it. I definitely think women are better at it. And why? Somebody suggested me why. I don't know the reason why.
Because women are more empathetic.
More empathy.
Okay, that's,
I think that's probably
okay.
it. Sure.
Gina?
I've been thinking a lot just in my own writing about pivotal moments, and so I thought it was interesting that you sang about why ostensibly your mother saying goodbye to her husband after so many years, and Vicki, you wrote about that first love encounter, and Taylor wrote about meeting Lucille Ball and life-changing moments. And what I've been thinking about, and I don't know if it resonates or if it makes any sense for you, and so I'm just interested, is sort of looking at that past, seeing it all, laying it out in front of you, and sort of channeling it, giving it your blessing, saying goodbyes. Is there some, beyond the obvious, how that empowers you as a creative person? Are you able at that point to sort of move on? Does it still have that emotional tug when you express it? You got emotional when you were reading, so did you when you were singing. So, I'm sort of thinking of it as a process of not closing a door, but you sort of reclaim some power over your life when you say goodbye to the past.
For me, I never had closure in that experience. And even when I had that phone call with him and I realized that it was because I was jailbait, there was a certain satisfaction with that. But I have to say that I didn't become unemotional about it until I finished writing it. And once I wrote it down,
That was your closure.
I was done. And I was really able for the very first time to truly forgive him. And we have a beautiful relationship now. We don't speak often, a couple times a year.
How
but
much older is he?
He's 5 years older than me, which now is
Nothing.
nothing,
Right.
totally
When you're
insignificant.
14.
But when you're 14, it's enormous. You know, he was out of high school. I was barely
Did you
starting.
talk about it? Have you spoken
You know,
about
I
it?
tried to get him. I tried
won't.
to engage
Guys
him
don't.
to talk about
Get
it.
him
And
to read
all he would say was that, you know, I was so young. And I had to figure out for myself, it was that, you know, in those days, if you took a 14-year-old girl, you went to jail. I mean, it was really, so of course, if he would have held my hand in public, if he would have put his arm around me, I mean, that was potentially big, risky stuff in those days. But he couldn't say the words, and he still couldn't say them to me today. But it's okay.
So
So you said that before,
No, he got married again. He's married again.
Is he still 19?
He's not still 19, and he's not, you know, and he is, you know, he's gotten older, he's gotten heavier, but there's, you know, yeah, but he'll always be that
Has he
way.
slowed down a little bit, if you get my drift?
He's not like my He's not like
Okay, I have a question. I want to go off you. That song about your mother saying goodbye is really devastating. And really beautiful. One of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. That happened.
Of course.
That happened. And you witnessed that. It's so sad. It's so beautiful. And you said, don't say goodbye, say farewell. And I think that's what's so beautiful about what we all do as writers is we navigate our own information and then impart it. Because now I'm different about my parents. That it isn't, you know, it's not goodbye, it's farewell. Very important, you know, because it's like how you look at a tragedy, how you look at a comedy, how you look at something and detach yourself, so we can survive. And then there was another thing that I really thought was somebody read about, the nest is about anger, the children leave. Did you write that?
Yes.
I made a note of it because it's like, how do you leave the nest and the child leaves through anger?
Right.
Where did that come from?
Well, it really did come from this mommy and me teacher who said it about 2-year-olds who were all running around and were, you know, yelling at us then. But it was, my realization was that it continues. And in fact, at the end of the novel, Five Spot asked me to write an essay. I said it could be about anything I wanted. So I wrote it about saying that if I could go back and talk to my 14-year-old self, the one thing I would, well, there are a bunch of things I would say, but the most important one was be nicer to mom. But then I talk through it and I talk about how, you know, when my 13-year-old daughter comes home and she's had a rough day, she takes it, you know, she gets mad at me a lot of the time or loses her temper about something in the house. And deep down I know it's because she's had a bad day, and I know she knows it's safe to get mad at me. And that happens in the book. The mother of the 25-year-old turns to her after her, you know, the grandson has been tough to his mother and says, we moms know, we know this is what we give our kids. We give them the right to take out their anger on us, and we forgive them for it because we get it. So at the end of this essay, I said that, you know, I have to believe my mother got it. You know, she understood what was happening, that I knew it was safe, and I knew she would never leave me no matter how angry I got.
I remember once when I was a glorious teenager, and we were having a row, and I was shouting at my mother, "I hate you," which I say so not proudly now. And she said back to me, "That's okay, because I love you enough for both of us."
Nice, Marley.
Yeah, I was gonna,
Things that
I was just going to kind of throw this out there as a follow-up to what you opened the discussion up with, and that is about writing from the autobiographical base, and that, you know, some writers say that that's where everything comes from. And yet I've heard some really, you know, top writers say that every time they sit down, it's a surprise. And they don't know. So I wondered if, just throw it out there, because most everything that I heard today, and I loved your, oh God, I love that song. But almost everything that I've heard seemed to have an autobiographical base of some kind, whether it's your legal profession, your adolescence, your, you know, mom experience, etc. So I just wanted to, what do you think about that?
It all has to come from a seed of truth, from your own experience. If not, then you're being a craftician. And of course, after you give birth through the seed of your own personal experience, then the crafting comes into play.
I've always thought that too, but I've actually Nathan Kanan, who's has some pretty good writing chops, says, I never know what I'm going to write about. I just sit there and I just find that so hard to believe, but I think some writers do that. And I was wondering about you, Claire, because I loved your book, but some of it, I could see where there were, because I know you a little bit, that there were seeds of you, but some stuff, absolutely not.
Right.
Yeah.
And that to me is the fun of writing
Yeah,
fiction.
okay.
And I'm sure Paul feels this way, is that you can take those seeds, you take those details. I mean, there are things that happen in real life that are just too good not to use in a book. But if you're writing fiction, the fun of it is you don't have to stick to anything else. You can take this one thing, and what was painful can become funny, what was funny can become painful. You cast it in a whole new world, really. And you put together things that weren't together in real life. And that, to me, is where all the fiction comes out of, is yes, details are often from real life, and the emotional basis can come out of real life. But then you can make up all the other stuff around it and just go to town. Mm-hmm. So I'd say it's neither one nor the other. Yeah. It's a real combination. Mm-hmm.
There's a writer's story that I heard once where a woman told a great story, and she said that she wore a beaded dress, a Schiaparelli beautiful dress in her house in San Francisco, and she was coming down the marble staircase of her father's house. One of the beads fell off. She slipped on it, and it cracked the stairs and created the San Francisco earthquake. And someone said, "Oh, her father never had a marble staircase." So it's like, what dazzling lie are we telling? But in some way that seems incredibly true. That could happen. My book is called Remade as Fiction. Because there's, and this has just been like a series of recovered memories the last month. But I was in front of the Dakota when John Lennon got shot.
Really?
And I heard the shot. And I was in front of the ambassador when Bobby Kennedy was shot.
Oh my Jesus.
Now,
It's you!
I don't ever want to write that. I don't want to know about this. It's bad enough. Wow. Just to have that information. This doesn't interest me at all to talk about. Maybe someday I'll, because I had to go in the Dakota that night. Wow. And maybe it'll be later, but it's almost like the mundane, the extraordinary ordinariness is more interesting sometimes. Mm-hmm. Like talking about it's so compelling to think about these kids that you have, that you inadvertently made a wheat cake for him. And the way you were so flip about it, I didn't mean to poison you, darling, and just these things.
Well, I actually, one of the first reviews of the book tore into the character, tore into the mother, and said, what kind of mother would poison her own child like that?
Oh, what?
It's
hello!
Hello! Yes, I've done it. I did it not within the year. I gave my son corn tortillas that had added wheat gluten, didn't notice it on the list, and he started throwing up, and I stood there outside the bathroom saying, I'm so sorry. And he said, it's okay, it's not your fault. Very early. So, as you know, I came right out of...
Gotta make it worse.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then
really.
the reviewer, though, said, what kind of she-demon?
That's what we call in television a CBS note, because in the CBS shows, three of them, they want the heroes to be likable, and they don't like flawed heroes, which we would otherwise call real people.
Yeah.
I wrote a pilot from Solomon versus Lord, in which Solomon has a nephew who is autistic, and gets home late one day from work, and the little boy has taken a can of something, doesn't matter what, put it in the microwave to try to heat it up, and of course the microwave explodes and there's a little fire. I get a note from a network executive. Our viewers wouldn't like that. He's a bad father if he let that happen.
Yeah,
So
right.
that came out of the pilot.
Yeah.
Sure.
Question?
Claire, I was just going to ask, how do you write 4 novels and raise 4 kids?
It's so easy now. I mean, the youngest is 10 now. So they're all, one's in college and the other 3 are in school most of the day. So it's luxurious now. It really is. I have plenty of free time. It was tougher when they were little, and I was talking to some people about it, but in a weird way, who was it here here, somebody here said, give a busy person, if you need something done, give it to a busy person. There is really something in that. And it was my entertainment. Like, I'd sit there and I loved my kids when they were little, but there were times where playing, you know, the blocks was boring, and I could do it physically and engage with them, and yet at the same time be thinking of the next scene, be thinking, what would the character say? And then when I get to the computer, it would be, you know, I would be so excited to be able to write it down. And I'd say the first novel, I still had a baby at that point. I had, as I was telling someone, I actually let the one nanny I had go. I found her another job and let her go. And for some reason that freed me up, and I was writing when the baby was napping and after the kids went to bed at night, and I've never written a book so easily, so fluidly, so happily. So there are times where it's not that easy. And there are times where a kid is sick and has to stay home. Now again, they're getting older, so it's getting easier, but there were times in the past, and you know, having a kid get up in the morning and say, you know, I can't go to school today, I would just think, okay, I lost today, I'm not going to get any writing done today. But you know, you roll with it.
Well, our buddy Harriet here has a book on songwriting called Becoming Remarkable, and one of the chapters she talks about writing in the margins, where, you know, you're in the line in the grocery store, you know, it's like, there are all these times when you can actually be writing or thinking about it that don't require you to be sitting down at a desk with a piece of paper in front of you.
I never leave without this.
Right.
I got out of the shower today, I keep a pad and a pen in my bathroom because in the shower I always do my best thinking. I've solved every problem in the shower.
That's the truth.
And I do all my status updates in the shower.
It's wax crayons.
I have to speak for in the shower.
She writes it on the glass shower.
I love that.
I was on deadline for a piece that I wrote for Sit and Spin, which is a group that I read in. Maybe you guys know it. It's through Comedy Central. And it's funny essays. And a lot of the essays tend to be so indulgent. The writers are just, you know, who cares if you like green tea with honey? And you have to kind of get to it more. You know this, you've done it. But I wanted to write a rant, a really funny rant, in a character like the uber Joan Rivers Taylor. Just like, that was my goal. And I was at my parents' house in Palm Springs, and they're really old. And there was like, my parents live your life, but with knives.
Got it.
Horrible.
Yeah, got it.
Bad.
Taylor.
My pen gone? Did my pen gone?
No, who's afraid of Virginia Woolf?
Oh yeah, but with senior citizens. Elizabeth Taylor was 34.
That is pretty.
But they go back and forth in such an ugly way that it's so enormous. And I would say to them, I go, but don't you know I'm on deadline? Can you stop screaming and torturing each other? I have to work too. So I would go to my room and I would just continue plowing it out. But the jokes were the funniest jokes I've ever written. And I pushed send, and I printed it, and I read it, and it was probably the best received comedy piece that I've ever written. In face of no matter what happens, you just have to do it.
Did you read it to them?
They didn't even know what I did.
Oh, by the way, Taylor has offered to do for us a piece from Streep Tease.
Love it.
Do it. Go.
Right?
Yeah.
What we did is we adapted 8 guys. Roy Cruz came up with this idea, and I took Sophie's choice. I watched it 15 times. I read the book, and then I edited this speech. And Sophie Zawaskowski is living in a Brooklyn boarding house, and Stingo finds out a little indiscretion in her story, and he wants to find out the truth. If I could only have gotten that milsa, that meat, to make my mother stronger, but you know that the meat went to the Nazis and you get caught. So I went to the counter and I took my black market money, and the peasants there sell that ham. And I buy that ham and I put it under my skirt and I'm pretending that I'm pregnant. And on the train, the Nazi look at me and I'm so scared that I'm shaking. And he come up and he pulled that ham out. from under the skirt. And they sent me to a work camp. Not because of that hand, but because they knew that I was afraid. I'm going to tell you something now. I'm going to tell you something that I've never told anyone in my life. Why? I hate my father. Beyond the words to tell it. My father still, how can I tell you how much I love my father? When I was a little girl, I would hear my father making that music on his typewriter and think to myself that no child had a more beautiful life. I believed that my father was a civilized man living in an uncivilized time. That was my life. My father worked at the University of Krakow, and he worked for a long time on a speech called Poland Jewish Problem. Ordinarily, I type that speech for my father and I don't listen to that words, to the meaning of that word, but I hear that word twice. That the solution for the Jewish-Polish problem is Warnalchok, extermination. I don't know what made me go to the ghetto that day, but something made me go there. And I stood for I don't know how long, but I watched those people, that man and the women and the children that my father is condemning to die. All those people would be Warnalchuk. And then I remember that my father is waiting for that speech. And I go back, and in my haste, I make so many mistakes into the typing. And there is no time for my father to check, and he'll read the speech. And he make that mistake that I make. And I can see him getting angry. And afterwards he come to me in front of his colleagues and he tells me, Zozia, your intelligence is pulp. Pulp. And I wanted to say, but what of the Jews? What of the Jewish people? But after that, my father did not trust me, and the Nazis, they take Joseph. The Gestapo killed him. And I was sent to Auschwitz. In Auschwitz, the train would stop, and the Nazis, the Germans, would make the decision of who would live and who would die. My son Ian. My son Ian was sent to the kindergarten, and my daughter Eva was sent to the crematorium. Because of my perfect German, I was able to work for Reichsführer Rudolf Hess in Auschwitz. It was the civilized. They was the first ones to die. So now you know why I have to lie. Because I thought that if people knew the truth of me, that I would be left alone. But then I meet my love, and he gives me that wine. Chateau Margaux, Minusam, Babuit. Do you know, Stingo, that when you live a good life like a saint, and you die, that must be the wine that they let you drink so you'll know that you're in paradise. Stingo, don't ever tell that to somebody, what you told me, that you'll never leave someone. No one. No one should ever tell that to me.
Did Meryl come and see it? Does she know about it?
No!
What?
No, but no.
You have her essence complete. I mean, I've seen that movie a bunch of times. You were Meryl Streep. I mean, oh my God, I think, damn, it was like exactly how she did it.
Thank you very much, thank you very much. It's just been such a difficult time for me. I had a little health crisis. And the health crisis was so horrifying that I actually opened up a sadder part of my consciousness. And this monologue helped me as an artist to travel through the health crisis. And I'm happy to say that the crisis is behind me. And I do believe it's from like, like going there. It's like you, more than any of us, have to go there. And it's like, you have to be the go-to person in your life. You have to confront it. And in that piece that I just did, it's just the most horrible confrontation that ever you have to make. But thank you for letting me do that.
Oh, that was so,
Thank
thank
you.
you. All right, ladies, I think we're gonna call it a day, but say thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.